Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone. What if the woman you were supposed to become is the one standing in front of the mirror right now, waiting for you to finally say hello? Stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you is not a self-help pep talk. It is not a list of 10 steps. It is something far older, far more sacred than that. It is the truth about reinvention and why it is never, ever too late for you. I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with yourself, because this is a private room, just you and me. Nobody else is listening. When was the last time you did something just for you? Not for your children, not for your husband or your mother or your grandchildren or your neighbor who needs a casserole. When was the last time you chose yourself without apologizing for it? For so many of us, and I am speaking directly to you. There came a day, maybe years ago, maybe decades ago, when we placed our dreams gently in a box, sealed it, and slid it quietly under the bed. We told ourselves later, when the children are grown, when the mortgage is paid, when I have permission. And then we looked up, and it was now. If you feel a tightening in your chest right now, that is not grief. That is recognition. That is your soul tapping gently on the glass, saying, I am still here. I never left you. Are you ready to come back? Psychology teaches us something extraordinary about human identity. Erik Erikson, one of the great thinkers of the human soul, described a stage of life, the one you and I are living right now, as a time of profound generativity. Not decline, not waiting, generativity. A pouring out of wisdom, meaning, and creative legacy that only arrives with the seasons you have lived. You are not at the end of your story. You are, right now, standing at the most interesting chapter. Let me tell you something that neuroscience discovered. Something that should feel like a deep exhale when you hear it. Your brain is not finished. Not at 55. Not at 65. Not at 75. The principal scientists call neuroplasticity tells us that the brain retains its ability to form new neural pathways, to learn, to adapt, to transform throughout the entire arc of human life. This is not a motivational metaphor. This is measurable biological fact. But here is what science alone cannot explain. What I have witnessed in decades of working with women just like you. The reinvention that happens in the second half of life is not just neurological. It is spiritual. It is a coming home. Dr. Mary Pfeiffer, in her beautiful work with women over 60, describes what she calls the discovery of an authentic self. A self no longer filtered through the approval of others. She calls it a liberation, an arrival. You see, for most of our lives, especially those of us raised in the decades when women were still told that selflessness was the highest virtue, we became experts in caring for everyone else's interior world while quietly ignoring our own. We became fluent in other people's needs and strangers to our own desires. That is not a character flaw. That is a learned behavior. And what is learned can be unlearned. What was buried can be unearthed. What was given away can be lovingly reclaimed. Let us talk about something that lives in the architecture of your mind, something psychologists call the narrative self. We are all, at our core, storytellers. And the most powerful stories we tell are the ones we tell about ourselves. Some of these stories are luminous and true, but many of them, and I say this with all the tenderness I can summon, were written for us by others long before we had the wisdom to question them. You're not the creative type. Women in our family don't do things like that. At your age, you should be, and some well-meaning voice filled in the blank with something small and safe and utterly wrong for who you truly are. Healing begins, and this is something I have watched happen in real time, in the most ordinary and magnificent ways. Healing begins the moment you become the author of your own story again. Not the inheritor, not the editor, the author. This is what Brené Brown means when she talks about the courage to be vulnerable. To say out loud, this is who I am. This is what I still want. This is what I choose, with whatever beautiful time I have left. That is not recklessness. That is one of the bravest things a human being can do. I want to tell you about some women. Their names have been changed to protect the sanctuaries of their private lives, but their stories are true. Every detail, every grace note, every tear. Margaret was 61 when her marriage of 34 years ended. She described that first year to me as standing at the bottom of a well, looking up at a small circle of sky. She had been a bookkeeper, a mother of 3, a woman who organized everything and owned nothing of herself. She told me she had always wanted to write children's books, specifically. Stories she had invented for her kids at bedtime, stories they had begged her to put on paper for 20 years. She had smiled and said someday. At 62, she enrolled in a creative writing class at her local community college. She was the oldest student there by 30 years. The first night, she nearly turned around in the parking lot. She told me. I sat in the car and thought, who do you think you are? Do you know that feeling? That voice, who do you think you are? That is not wisdom. That is fear wearing wisdom's clothing. And Margaret recognized it for what it was, took a breath as wide as the sea, and walked through that door anyway. 3 years later, she had published her first children's book. It was dedicated to her grandchildren, and the dedication page read, "It is never too late to tell a true story. Then there is Rosa." At 68, Rosa was, by every external measure, a beloved woman. 4 children, 9 grandchildren, a church community that depended on her for everything from organizing funerals to making tamales for 300 people at Christmas. Rosa's giving had no floor, but Rosa had a secret. She had a gift, a voice, literally. A singing voice so beautiful that, as a young woman, a music teacher had once told her parents she could have a career. Her parents, practical and loving and fearful, in the way parents of their generation were, had said, "That's not for girls like us." Rosa sang at Mass. That was her sanctuary. 4 minutes once a week. And she had made her peace with that, or so she believed, for 40 years. When I met Rosa, she was in my office because her doctor had referred her for what he called chronic low-grade depression. She said she wasn't depressed. She was just tired. Tired in a way that sleep didn't fix. We spent 3 sessions before she mentioned the singing. And when she did, something in her voice changed. It was as if a light came on in a room that had been dark for a very long time. I asked her, "What if you sang? Not at Mass, but for yourself? What if you took voice lessons just to hear what's still there?" She looked at me as if I'd suggested she sprout wings. And then she laughed. And the laugh had music in it. Rosa is 70 now. She sings in a community choir. She's not performing at Carnegie Hall. She doesn't want Carnegie Hall. She wants Tuesday evenings with 12 other women who love music, and a director who once said to her, "Rosa, you have a gift, and you have just enough time left to give it the life it deserves." That is what a healed life sounds like. Let's be honest with each other for a moment, because I think you deserve honesty more than comfort. There is something very real that keeps us from our own reinvention, and it is not age, it is not circumstance, it is not even other people, though we very often give them the credit. It is us. Psychology has a name for itself, sabotage. But that clinical phrase doesn't capture the tenderness of what actually happens. What actually happens is that the human mind, your exquisitely wise, beautifully complex mind, has been running a protective operating system for decades. And that system equates change with danger. This is not weakness. This is evolution. Your nervous system learned, through years of real experience, that putting yourself out there carries risk. The risk of judgment, the risk of failure, the risk of being seen, really seen, and found wanting. So it built boundaries around your biggest dreams to keep them safe. And in keeping them safe, it kept them silent. The work of reinvention, the true psychological work, is learning to distinguish between the boundaries that protect your peace and the walls that imprison your potential. Here is something I need to say to you with absolute clarity. With every credential and every decade of experience I carry into this room with you today, you do not need anyone's permission. Not your adult children's permission to live fully. Not your late husband's blessing on choices he never knew you wanted. Not your mother's approval, God rest her soul, for the version of you she couldn't quite see. You are not a girl waiting to be chosen. You are a woman who has earned every single line on her face, every gray thread in her hair, every quiet wisdom that lives in her bones. And you are allowed, you are called, to use it. In my years of practice, I have watched women in their 60s begin painting. Women in their 70s learn Italian. Women at 68 go back to school. Women at 71 fall in love. Women at 65 leave careers that had drained them for 20 years and find vocations that fill them back up. And do you know what every single one of them said? Everyone. when they look back, I only wish I'd started sooner. And then, almost always, but I'm so grateful I finally started. I want to give you something practical now, not a checklist. I have never believed in checklists for the soul, but a gentle, psychological framework for beginning. The first step is what I call the excavation question. Not what do I want to do with my life? That question is too large and it paralyzes. The excavation question is smaller and more honest. What made me lose track of time when I was young? Before I learned to perform, before I learned to be useful, before I learned to ask for permission, what made me lose track of time? For some of you, an answer surfaced immediately. Honor it. Write it down on something real, paper, not a phone screen. It deserves permanence. For others, there is silence where the answer should be. That silence is not emptiness. That silence is a 40-year accumulation of noise finally becoming quiet enough that you can hear yourself again. Give it time. Give it grace. The second element is community. And I mean this in the deepest psychological sense. Human beings are not designed for reinvention in isolation. We need witness. We need a sanctuary, a circle of people who see who we are becoming and reflect it back to us with love. If you do not have that circle yet, find it. A class, a club, a church group with space for real conversation, a grief group that has grown into a joy group. Anywhere that women gather in authentic relationship and refuse to keep everything surface level. You need women who will ask you, so how are you really? And then wait for the real answer. Based on what the research tells us, and what I have witnessed in the most transformed lives I have been privileged to walk alongside, there are 3 practices that, woven into the ordinary fabric of your days, create the conditions for profound reinvention. The first is solitude with intention, not loneliness. Those are very different things. Intentional solitude, 15 minutes each morning before the world begins its demands, when you sit, not with your phone, not with the news, but with yourself. In that quiet, ask simply, what does my life want from me today? And listen. The second practice is creative expression. It does not matter what form it takes. Baking counts. Arranging flowers counts. Writing one true sentence in a notebook counts. Creativity is not a talent. It is a biological need, as essential to your well-being as sleep. When we deny it, something inside us becomes restless and sad. When we feed it, something inside us becomes luminous. The third practice is what I call generous courage. One act each week that is slightly outside your comfort zone. Not a dramatic leap, a step, a phone call you've been postponing, a class you've been circling, a conversation that deserves honesty. Generous courage means being generous with yourself, giving yourself the gift of a slightly bigger life, week by week, until the life you're living matches the life you were meant to live. I want to speak now to something that most conversations about reinvention conveniently skip: the grief. Because here is the truth that I owe you before you become who you are becoming. There may be a season of mourning who you were, and the life you lived, and the choices you cannot unchoose, and the time that has moved through your hands like water and cannot be called back. That grief is not self-pity. That grief is love. Love for the life you gave, for the people you served, for the woman you were in each season. Let yourself feel it. Honor it. Because on the other side of genuine grief, not performed grief, not suppressed grief, but grief truly felt, is something the ancient mystics knew, and psychology is only now beginning to prove freedom. Psychologist William Worden's work on grief teaches us that healthy mourning has 4 tasks, and the last is the most important for our conversation today. He calls it finding an enduring connection, not forgetting, not moving on, but integrating what was, the losses, the loves, the long chapters of devotion and sacrifice, into the foundation of who you are becoming. Your past is not a prison. It is the soil from which your next season grows. Everything you have endured, survived, given, and grieved, it is all in you, as nourishment, as roots. I want to talk about identity, specifically the parts of your identity that have been crowded out by the roles you've played so beautifully, so faithfully for so long. You are a mother. You are a grandmother. Perhaps a widow. Perhaps a friend who holds entire communities together with both hands. These are not small things. These are magnificent things. But they are not the totality of you. Underneath the caretaker, underneath the organizer, underneath the woman who makes everything work, There is a person with specific and irreplaceable interiority. Tastes and hungers and aesthetic sensibilities and opinions and passions, and a particular way of seeing the world that belongs to no one else on this earth. When did you last ask yourself, what do I actually think about this? Not what my family thinks. Not what my church thinks. Not what is safe to say. What do I, this specific, irreplaceable woman, actually believe and feel and love and want? That question is the beginning of an identity reclaimed. And it is never, I promise you, and I have staked my professional life on this, it is never too late to ask it. I want to say something directly to the part of you that has absorbed, through decades of living in this culture, the belief that age is a diminishment, that wrinkles are a wound, that gray hair is a surrender. That is a lie. And the culture that sells it profits from your insecurity. I refuse to participate in that economy, and I invite you to refuse with me. Here is what actually accumulates with age for women who have done any measure of inner work, emotional regulation. The ability to feel the full range of human experience without being destroyed by it. Pattern recognition. The wisdom to recognize a situation that once took you years to untangle. Authenticity. A decreasing tolerance for performance and an increasing appetite for what is real. Carl Jung believed, and his collected writings on the second half of life are among the most quietly revolutionary ideas in the history of psychology, that the authentic self, the deepest and most integrated version of a human being, cannot be fully accessed until midlife. That the first half of life is necessarily about building an ego, a persona, a workable self to navigate the world. And the second half, if we choose it, is about something infinitely richer. It is about soul. I want to spend a few minutes on something that women of our generation were often implicitly taught was slightly self-indulgent joy. Pleasure. The simple, revolutionary act of being happy. Research in positive psychology. And this is a young field doing some of the most important work in our time. Consistently shows that subjective well-being in women actually increases through the 60s and into the 70s for those who remain socially connected and purposefully engaged. Not despite their age. Because of it, the research uses a term I love, the positivity effect. As we grow older, and this has been replicated across cultures and continents, we become better at savoring, better at noticing beauty, better at releasing resentments that would have consumed us at 30, better at choosing where we place our limited and precious time and energy. This is the superpower that age provides if we let it. The ability to be fully here. The ability to choose meaning over momentum. The ability to say, with grace and without apology, this is what I want my